In sleep, you fall into a world that feels all too real, because it is. A place where truth whispers in symbols, and your soul tries to speak.
The question is,
Are you listening?
Are you listening?
Welcome to the Porn Free Millennial podcast. I'm your host, Mac. And we just recorded an episode, Dr. Borse and I, on The Exorcist, Porn, and Possession. And while we were ending the episode, we were talking a bit about how it'd be interesting to dive into the importance of dreams and paying attention to our dreams. So today we're going to start with talking about that. Dr. Borse has some really interesting dreams and real life events that we wanted to discuss today. And then I also have three dreams of temptation where I actually did commit an exorcism in my dream, which was kind of nuts. So it ties into episode 48. If you haven't listened to it yet, phenomenal episode there. But we wanted to strike while the iron is hot. So that's why we're doing a back-to-back episode. So I think we'll probably pull from some things that we might have just talked about to weave it in. But I think it's really important, right? Because I feel like for a long part of my life, I was I wasn't really paying attention to my dreams and the meaning of them. And I think as I've gotten older, and as I've gotten wiser, as I've experienced more life, and as I've read more of the Bible, to be honest with you, I've started to put more of an importance on the dreams that I have and the thoughts going through my head and like what does that mean in my life. So that's what we'll dive into. But if you're just hopping in, Dr. Borse is at his college office right now. He's a professor at the at the University of Arkansas at Monticello of English philosophy, also teaches film class as well. And he's been on this now is the sixth time. So we're just boosting stats at this point for Dr. Borse. So definitely the person that's been on this show the most, which is an honor. But episodes 14, 21, 28, 31, 48, now 49, right before episode 50. So honored to have you on, Dr. Borse.
Thank you for having me back. I'm glad we're going to get to continue the conversation because
Yes.
we got to a point where we started talking about dreaming in reference to Exorcist, and I think both of us recognize. Wait a minute, that's a whole nother episode. I think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So let's dive into it. I'll hand the mic over to you.
well, let's go ahead and tie it to episode 48.
Yeah.
Don't forget that there's a very important dream sequence in the film The Exorcist.
Right. Right.
Father Karras has a dream, and it's an admixture of things that are, we could say are fictitious, are things that are drummed up in his imagination. He imagines that he's chasing his mother in
Right.
the streets of the city. There's all this noise going on, but in the middle of that dream, you get a repeated image of a falling necklace, and
Yes.
we can't possibly know what that means until the end of the film when Karras is telling the demon to take him instead. What does Reagan do? She reaches up and she pulls that necklace from around his neck and breaks it off of it before the demon can go. That medallion has to be taken off of Karras's body, and so you don't realize until you've seen it. Oh, that's what that meant.
Oh wow. Okay. Okay. I didn't. Wow. I didn't pick that up right away, but now
Yeah,
that you
I
say
mean,
it,
in
it's like,
film terms,
whew.
sometimes we say, "Oh, that's a little bit of foreshadowing," but I think it's even more than that. I thought it was fascinating. It's a great sequence, and you also notice that the dream sequence is filled with stairways
Yes.
up
Yeah.
and
The
down, up
yeah.
and down.
Because
You
it's
know,
his mother that just
right?
did she
She comes.
just pass or is it before she passed?
It's before he knows she's passed.
Okay. Okay.
I believe it's the dream he has when she passes.
Hmm.
You see what I mean? And she comes up and then she turns around as he's trying to get to her and she goes back down, which is really, really scary.
Into the subway.
Exactly. But it's down those stairway, down into the underworld. Um, and then we're going to see her again and when the demon uses her to try to get to Karis. But this caused both of us to realize that you and
Yeah.
I you and I have both had experiences of lucid dreaming. So why don't you tell your
Okay.
listeners, viewers, what lucid dreaming actually is?
Yeah, I mean, so I would define it as you are conscious in your dream. You're aware that you're in a dream, and then you could basically interact with your dream like it's life in a way. I mean, it's different in some senses, right? It's more fantastical and crazy things happen, but you're aware of what's going on. You can make decisions. At least in my dreams, like I've consciously made a decision, and we'll get into that in my dreams and in
Right,
your dreams. But
right,
you consciously make a decision that you're faced with in the dream, and then that can then, like in real life as well, right, that will have some kind of ripple effect into something else
right,
that will then affect uh it will affect things. And so yeah, that's how I would define lucid dreaming: is you're conscious in your dream, but you know it's a dream. Like
right. You know, you're dreaming, and you know you're asleep, and you're dreaming. Uh,
exactly.
and mine started, I guess, when I was a kid. I was a sleepwalker, and I think these two things are attached. And sleepwalkers are people who don't secrete enough of a hormone while they're asleep to stop them from actually getting up and enacting the dreams that they're in.
Mhm.
I have no memories of these. I just have reports from my parents. It was so chronic with me at a certain point when I was growing up that they had to put chain locks on the outside doors, kitchen door, front door, high enough that I couldn't reach them, so that I could not open the door because I used to leave the house. And again, I have no memory of that.
Wow.
Um,
How far
but
did you how far was the farthest that you walked out of the house
I don't.
from your
The one episode I remember my mom telling me about was that one time they got a call or a knock on the door from a neighbor saying, "Hey, your son is out here running up and down the street screaming." And
wow.
so up to a block away, I don't know.
That's
Uh,
phenomenal. That's crazy to think about.
and that has happened to me. I had another episode when I was growing. I grew up in partially in Michigan in Grand Rapids, and I remember I must have been sleepwalking and somehow ended up behind the furnace in the basement. And the
Mm.
space between this furnace and the wall and that part of the basement was only about 6 inches or 8 inches. And so I was trapped. That
Oh,
one, that one I remember. I mean, I woke up screaming because I
yeah.
did not know where I was. And I remember my dad finding me down there and reaching his arm in and grabbing me and pulling me out. Because it was like my chest was pressed against the back of the furnace and
Oof.
my back was so it was like I was in a coffin.
Oof.
How I ended up there, I don't know.
Yeah.
But later in high school, I realized that I had these experiences where I knew I was dreaming, and I sort of was joking with my sister one night. I said, "Well, you can control your dreams," and she's like, "No, you can't." And I said, "Yes, you can. In fact, I'm going to have a nightmare tonight," which was a stupid thing for me to decide to do because boy, did I ever. Um, and it was one of those dreams where I woke up, I was in my own bed, but I couldn't move.
Mm.
And I had to make myself scream to wake myself up. And it really was terrifying.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's exactly what I did. I woke up, but I knew I was asleep, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed because I had sleep paralysis, which when you have sleep paralysis, I guess that's when you're REM. That's when you're doing your most active dreaming, to make sure that you don't sleepwalk. Um, and then later in life, I started having a series of lucid dreams that were connected. And they stayed connected for the rest of my adult life. And I don't know if yours were like that too. Um, you know,
Yeah.
Descartes. Descartes distinguishes between three different types of ideas. Fictitious ideas are the ones that we can completely manipulate and control. And then adventitious ideas are the ones that exist inside our imagination, but also outside of us. So, like this desk, I can't manipulate this desk in this reality. I can understand it, I can manipulate it in my mind, but I can't do it also in reality in the way that I can a unicorn in my imagination.
Mm.
And then the final kind of ideas are innate ideas like mathematics, knowledge of mathematics, or even, as Descartes argues, the knowledge of God or the existence of God. But I bring it up because Descartes makes a certain point about dreaming. in answer to the question, what if this is all a dream, right? What if this is all a simulation? And my answer tracks kind of his with his too. And he says, well, I know the difference between a dream and a non-dream because when I'm dreaming, I don't have memories of all the other dreams I've had. But when I'm awake, I have memories of all the other experiences I've had. And I think this is a legitimate point. But I think you and I would agree, or maybe me more so, because this is one of the features of my lucid dreaming, is that when I'm lucid dreaming, I do have memories of the other lucid dreams that I've had. It's almost as if I step back into a world that I've already been in.
Yeah, and there's places that you could say, okay, let's go to that place tonight.
Right. And so my lucid dreams generally have a feature in them, which is the tell. And that gets repeated over geography, over time. It's a very interesting one. But it's that aha moment. You have that aha moment in the lucid dream where it's like, oh, yeah, okay, now I know where I am. Because mine start out with a little bit of confusion, and then I'll be like, oh, okay, now I know what's going on.
It's kind
And
of like Inception. Sorry to interrupt, but it's kind of like Inception,
yeah,
where he's got that what is it, that spinning top
yeah,
that
the draft,
yeah, he'll spin it, and then I
yeah,
think
or
if it wobbles, that means that he's what, like, not lucid dreaming or
right,
something,
right.
and then if it keeps going, that means he's like in the dream.
That's funny. That's funny you'd mentioned Inception because the first time I watched that film, I was really annoyed with it. And I wrote a review of it, a mini review of it on Facebook, and this was my review. Dear Inception, I fell asleep on an airplane one time too. You know what I mean? Like, come on, guys. But then I watched it again, and I deepened my appreciation for what was going on. You know what was going on.
That's a wild movie. It's kind of
Uh,
like that movie. Not to derail us too much, but Tenet as well.
I haven't seen that yet.
Oh
I've
my
been
gosh,
waiting for
we
it
gotta.
to appear on a streaming service that I'm already paying for, so that I can see it. But somebody recommended that.
It's a crazy movie.
Interstellar is another one that traffics in these kinds of things, which I think are related. Um, but going back to paying attention to dreams,
Yep,
right?
yep.
Karis' dream has that feature in it in The Exorcist of that falling necklace, and we can't possibly know what that means until the end of the film, which is very clever.
Very clever.
Um, but often we find that the things that we're dreaming about are things that we are either subconsciously or very consciously, confronting in our waking life. And I
Right.
think this is why the ancients took dreaming so seriously. They thought of it as a way that the gods were sending messages to us. And we've never really lost this regard for dreams, even in modern and postmodern times. A lot of psychology is based upon reading dreams, and what these, I know that a cigar sometimes is just a cigar, but sometimes it's something else, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm fascinated by the topic and that interplay between these two different worlds. In my philosophy class, I'll do a thought experiment where I sort of run through the history of mankind on the globe to show, and this is part of my lecture on YouTube that's up now, to show that human beings are made for happiness as opposed to work and drudgery, right?
Mhm.
But in my thought experiment, I have an individual on an island that has a lifespan of 1 billion years. And we get to the point where we have perfected through technology all of the things that we need to take care of our survival. And at that point, we would go through a period of drudgery, where we were bored, right? Because the mind wants more than that.
Right.
Um, and I'll tell my students, I said, at a certain point, you will notice that every day your body does become so tired that you have to recharge, you have to sleep, right? And then you start to realize when you wake up in the morning that during the night you you sometimes go other places. You can fly. Do you ever have flying dreams?
Oh yeah. I mean, my favorite dreams, because I grew up playing basketball. My dad played
Mhm.
college basketball. I think I always had dreams as a kid to play college basketball and all
Right.
this stuff. But I have these dreams where I'm just dunking on people. But I'm
Hmm.
like jumping like 10 feet in the air. Like I'm just
Right.
soaring and I'm just like bam. And my dad's watching me, my mom's watching me. It's like I'm in high school again almost.
Yeah,
But I've got like this superhuman ability to jump.
that's
And
funny.
Yeah, I love those dreams. Sometimes those are the ones where I'm like, I gotta dream about this. I need to get my confidence, or that spark or whatever. That
The
that
very
that
the,
wonder.
the very first piece of creative writing I ever published was called Icarus. And it is a reminiscence of me growing up and thinking about what a father is. Okay.
Okay.
But in it, I say, and this is true of me my whole life. Every flying dream I've ever had is always inside the house, and I
Hmm.
never fly higher than 3, 4 feet off the ground.
Interesting. Okay.
I
Okay.
never fly high into the sky. And that reminiscence called Icarus, which was
Oh, do you actually have it?
published in this a long time ago in the 90s. Uh,
Cool. That's awesome.
and yeah, that's a copy my mom saved, and I inherited a bunch of her books when she passed away. So I got a copy of it back. Um, but in it, that's what I say. I say I when I was a kid, I had flying dreams, but I never flew high off the ground, and I never went outside. An Icarus without the fear of the sun, which was a comment on something about my timidity as a child in a sense. Um, but I bring it up because dreaming ends up being this very, very interesting side of our metaphysical being,
Right.
right? When we realize on our imaginary island that we, in the middle of the night, our souls seem to escape our bodies and we go to these other places, and then we have a memory of it when we wake up, but it's a memory. It's funny when you remember your dreams, when you're in the dream, it always makes total sense. But when you try to tell the dream, it's absurd, right? Um, you know what I mean?
Oh,
So
that reminds me. My little brother. We were hunting. This is the one time he went hunting with us. My
yeah,
dad and I. He's a vegetarian now. God bless him.
yeah,
But it was one of his high school teachers, and he was like, Leonard, you're dead.
yeah,
Something like that, to where we all were like, what the heck, dude? And we're like, what's going on? And it might have, I think it was some kind of, I think it was football coach or something. He was kind
right,
of locking horns with him. And it's amazing, sorry, how that just kind of popped out and he
right,
just said it. And I've had that too in some of my, where I'll like, my ex-wife would be like, hey, you were like talking in your sleep and saying this stuff, or like
right,
laughing or something. And it's crazy how whatever that is inside of us will come out,
right.
come out, and then we'll be in it. We'll like be in the emotion or whatever that relationship might be. It's like a story or some kind of environment that
Yeah.
is based off of this feeling or this premonition, something like that.
No, I was telling my brother about a dream I had where I was at my parents' house out in South Texas, and I went outside, and there were these two wolves that were coming up to me, and they were walking on their hind legs,
Oh
and they were
gosh, it's
and they were
terrifying.
and they were talking to me, and then one of them started pushing me, and it kept pushing me on the ground, and I'm like, finally I stood up to it and said, "Quit pushing me," and my brother goes, "And that's when you knew you were dreaming." I was like, and we all just busted out laughing because the whole thing was absurd. Like, but when you're in it, it feels just
Yeah.
the fabric of reality feels totally, totally right. When I went to lunch with a couple of buddy mine in high school, and we were talking about dreams, and our friend Rodney said, "Yeah, I just had a dream last week that I died." And we're like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Yeah, I went over to my girlfriend's house. I knocked on the door. Her dad doesn't like me, and he opened the door, and he had a shotgun, and he shot me square in the face and blew my head off."
Oh my
And he goes,
gosh.
and I was dead, and all I could feel was all this blood streaming down my chest. Well, there's a guy. We were at Pizza Hut. There's a guy sitting at a table next to us, an adult. We're seniors in high school or juniors, and he goes, "That's not possible." And we turned to him and said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Yeah, it's been scientifically proven that if you die in a dream, then you'll die in your sleep." And I said, because I've always been me, I said, "So how did they prove that? Ask a dead person that died in their sleep what they were dreaming about?" And he just looked at me like, and this is why my wife says sometimes, she's like, "I don't know why you don't get punched more often than you do." I was like, "I know,
I mean, you're
uh,
right though. I mean,
exactly." I
that
mean,
checks out to me.
yeah. So we were like, "No, that's perfectly acceptable." but yeah, it's fascinating the kind of flights that we go on. And what I use this in my philosophy course for is to tell students that we intuit that there is more to our being and our existence than just what is contained in our physical material being, that there's something beyond it. And then I take it a step farther. I'll ask them, I'll say, and this is, I want to illustrate how important this is. um, and I'll ask one of them, where are you going after this class is over? And they're like, I'm going home. I'm like, okay, so how are you going to get there? I'm going to drive. How are you going to get to your car? I'm going to walk there. But how are you going to get to your car? And at that point, they're like, I'm going to walk there. I'm like, look, the only way you
Much
can
better.
get to your car is if you project a future self of yourself into the future to the car, and then present self has to meet your future self there and get in the car, and then you've got to do it again. And so we always toy with the idea that wouldn't it be cool if we could travel through time? We are time travelers. That's what we do.
Mm. That's yeah.
And so I think that the whole thing about dreaming is a question about, well, where exactly are we traveling then, right? um,
Yeah.
in our waking life, obviously, we're traveling in the adventitious world, as Descartes would call it, of a world that I understand and contain in my understanding, but also one that exists independently of my understanding that I operate in. But when we're in the dreaming world, as the necklace in The Exorcist reminds us, we're in this shadowland that's in between the imaginary and the adventitious or the practical world of the here and now, which certainly exists. I don't think that they're independent. They're we often want to say it's either one or the other. Like, what if the whole thing is a simulation? Well, we live in a world where some things are subjective, correct,
Correct.
and some things are objective.
Correct.
Now, there's a whole branch of literary theory that says that everything's subjective. Well, no, it's not, because you can't decide tomorrow to run your car on sugar water. Go ahead and try it. The laws of physics will rebuff you.
Yeah, or
Um,
like that mountain in the distance is going to move to,
right.
a few hundred yards that way.
But what I point out to people is I say, look, there is the world of the objective reality. There is our interpretation of objective reality, which is sort of in between, right? But then there is also the world of taste, which is entirely subjective. So
Right.
don't try to make the whole world the world of taste. Some things are a matter of taste, some things are not. Um, but again, dream dream world ends up being a weird admixture of both things, and yet one in which we escape some of the practical laws. Right? We can fly, or we have powers. We can dunk on people, which in real life we can't do.
I
uh,
have in the past, but not right now in my current state.
right,
I might be able to hang on the rim, maybe get the ball above if I went into a gym, but
right,
I got to lose a few more pounds before I'm flying high again.
right. So, but then again, with lucid dreaming, on the other hand, there seems to be a different tenor to it. You know what I mean? A different or a different texture to it. For me,
Mm.
it does anyway.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I agree
Uh,
with you. With you.
so I don't know if that's a good enough precursor to our talking about the particular dreams that we've had, especially as they relate to the topic that we were talking about in the last episode, which is the exorcist possession. Because I really do think we're in that world. We're talking about the intersection of the spiritual and the physical, right? And that line that you quoted from Exorcist 3, which we want to recommend everybody watch as the sequel to Exorcist 1, um, where, the demon says or calls, the manipulation of human beings, like in terms of meat, right? And pay attention, the body ends up being really, really important in that.
Right.
So, um, but I'll just launch right in. The first set of lucid dreams, or this set of lucid dreams, I've been having my whole adult life. They're not ones that plagued me from my youth. The very first one that I had was when I was in college, and I woke up. They always happen at 3 o'clock in the morning, the witching hour.
Oh, great.
Okay, but I woke up in my dorm room and I looked at the clock and it was 3 o'clock. I had one of those little alarm clocks with the red, you know,
I remember.
display.
I remember those.
Yeah, and the door to my room was open. I didn't have a roommate. I had a double room, but I didn't have a roommate. And so I looked and the door was open and the light from the hallway lights were out in my dorm. I lived on the first floor and I lived in the last dorm room to the exit on the ground floor.
Okay.
And the light that was shining through my door was open maybe about this much. The light that was shining into the room was from the parking lot. There was a street lamp out there, right? Kind of yellowish. That yellow white, not the kind of light that we have these days. This is back in the 1980s, after I got back from Rome, which will come up later. And so I got up out of bed and I went and I opened the door a little bit more. And I noticed when I got to the door that dried leaves had blown into my room from the hallway. And I looked out, the exit doors were glass and they were closed, and the light that was coming through was from the parking lot. And I just thought, well, maybe the wind blew the outside door open. That blew my door open because it wasn't locked, and it blew leaves from the hallway into my room. So I shut the door and I went back to sleep. And that was it. That was all that happened in that one. But then later, when I lived in another dorm before I graduated, I had another one of these dreams. And in that one, I had to think back to that one to say, oh, that was a dream. Just, do you see what I mean? In the moment, I didn't know it was a dream. I just thought
Yeah.
I got out of bed and shut the door and went back to bed. But I did look. And so the next one that I had on that campus was in a different dorm room. I was on the second floor this time. And I was a stomach sleeper at the time. I'm trying to train myself not to be. And I woke up in my bed. Oh, excuse me. I skipped one. No, I didn't. And it felt to me like it felt to me like the bed was moving. My ear was on the mattress. You know how when the springs compress, you can kind of hear it and feel
Hmm.
it.
Yeah. 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 Yep.
And so I lifted up from where I was and I looked out the window of my dorm room. And again, yellow light cascading through the yard in between the dorms
Yeah.
from the parking lot. Okay. Same quality of yellow light. And then I realized that I was looking through something, and I realized that in between my building and the building across the courtyard, the entire courtyard was just filled with spider webs. And there
Okay.
were literally hundreds of thousands of spiders. Okay. Um, and right then I was like, oh, I'm dreaming. Like, that's not real. And I put my head back down on my pillow, I guess. And then I felt as if somebody was lifting my mattress from the other end, lifting it up slowly. I could
Okay.
hear it and I could feel it. I could feel the movement of the bed moving up like this. And I had sleep paralysis. I know I'm dreaming, but I'm trying to turn my head to look to see who it is. And I can only get my head back about that far. And I saw this shadowy figure lifting my mattress up.
Woo. That's
And
terrifying.
I couldn't see it, but I could feel that my dorm room door was open again.
Mm.
But then the mattress went back down, and whatever it was, went away.
Okay.
Okay. Now I want to reinforce with you that during that one was kind of scary.
Yeah.
In later, I moved to an apartment, and I had a similar experience in the middle of the day where I was taking a nap, and I never take naps. And I felt my mattress going up and down, and I thought one of my roommates was playing a joke on me, and I looked under the bed and there was nobody there. I immediately got up because I recognized that experience was the same as the one that I had in the dorm on the other side of campus some time ago. And I was like, there's this weird connection, right? Um, and then when I moved to Louisiana, this is the best one. is the most involved one. I got off work bartending one night when I was in Louisiana. I probably said this on other episodes. I was the principal of a Catholic school, a graduate student at LSU, and a bartender all at the same time.
It's
And the
quite
three
the
were
interesting life.
right. The three worlds could not meet. You know what I mean? So I was Clark
Yeah.
Kent during the day, and then my wife would spit me out of the van with taking the kids home from school. She taught for me at the bar. I'd work until 11 o'clock at night, and then I'd get a ride home because
Okay.
we only had one car. Um, but one night I did have the car, so it must have been on a Saturday.
Okay.
And got out of the bar around midnight, drove back to Port Allen. And I'm the kind of person that, when I get done with the day, I can't just jump into bed. You know what I mean?
Same.
I,
Same
I
here.
gotta,
Same here.
I gotta have a beer. I gotta, relax, do something. And so that particular night, I ran to the convenience store. I think I got like a burrito or some microwave burrito to bring home, and popped that in the microwave. Turned the TV on, and the story that was on the television was of Pope John Paul II's last trip before he died,
Hmm.
which was to retrace the steps of St. Paul. Okay. And he went to Jerusalem, he went to Athens, he went through Turkey, back to Rome. You know what I mean? And what was interesting about this particular thing was that John Paul didn't schedule major events along the way. He just did it, right? And I was when I was in Rome, I got to go be in a general audience with John Paul II and to a special mass for university students at the Vatican in St. Peter's with John Paul. So I got to see him up close twice. I
Wow.
didn't need it. Okay. And I'm going to go back to that story in a minute. So I was really, really impressed with this. And I thought to myself, because I wasn't sleepy, you know, I'm a lit guy, but I've never read the Bible like literature.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like I'm just a Catholic guy, goes to mass, I hear scripture, I pay attention to it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
do.
Yep. Yep.
But I've never sat down and read it like it was a story, like this great story. And so I picked up my Bible and I opened it up to the Acts of the Apostles and I just read it. And fantastic. You know what I mean? Um, Fantastic. And then I made the mistake of thinking to myself, I've never read the book of Revelation.
Yeah. Right.
So I did. And when I finished it, and by the time I finished it, we're talking now, what was it, 11:30 when I got home? Now we're running on 3 o'clock in the morning, right? Not quite 3 o'clock. And so I remember when I finished it, I thought, well, that wasn't that scary. I expected it to be scary, right?
Yeah. 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 Sure.
But it's not. It's not scary. It's just visionary. It's like being in a dream, right? And it is a dream. Very important, right? So I set it aside, um, and I just laid down on the couch where I was, which was in the back TV room of our house. Now, the way the house is situated is a one story house. Living room has a wall between it with a window, just like the one that's behind me here. You could see into the kitchen, into the dining room, excuse me. But to get there, you had to go around that way to get into the dining room and then to the kitchen and then all the way back to where the back TV room, which was kind of an add-on to the house, right? And so I laid down and then I woke up and I sat up on the couch and I could see through that window. I mean, through the doorway in the back room, all the way through that window to the front living room, that
Hmm.
the front door was open and there was light spilling through.
Okay.
Same quality of light from the street lamps, right? So there's a third street lamp, right? And so I walk through the kitchen, through the dining room, hook around that little wall with the window in it, into the living room, and the door is open, and there are leaves cascaded into my living room. And so I look out the door and I shut it, I lock it, I turn around and I go back and lay down on the couch again. And then a few minutes later, I wake up and the door's open again.
Hmm.
So I go back up there and I'm like, I just locked this. You know what I mean? And I walk through and I locked it again. I go back and lay down on the couch again. And lo and behold, third time, it's open again. So now I know I'm dreaming. I'm like, okay, right? It's the same thing. Door ajar, light spilling through, leaves, right? But the thing is, this is in May. There should not be dead leaves. Where'd they come from? Right. So, so I go back and this time I make sure, right? 3 times, lock it. And when I come back around the door, the little hallway that goes back into the dining room, the
Mhm.
dining room chair at the end of our dining room table is pulled away from the table and turned around facing me in that little hallway.
Okay.
And it wasn't there a second ago.
Mm.
So I reach out very deliberately and feel feel it to make sure it's there. Very deliberately turn it back around, put it in its place, go lay on the couch. A few seconds later, wake up, door's open again. So I walk back through, shut the door again. And this time, when I came around the corner, the chair that had been moved before was now on top of the dining room table, flipped around facing me.
No kidding.
And I
Okay.
was like, all right, I'm done with this. And I took the chair down and I put it back. And I crawled into bed with my bride instead of going back to the couch. And I slept for the rest of the night. So as you can see, with my experiences, they all seem to be relating to each other, right? And they're years apart, oftentimes. At UD, the 3 that I had there were kind of truncated. But then I moved to Indiana, didn't have any experiences in Indiana. And then I left Indiana and I came to Arkansas. And then they re-upped when I got down here.
Hmm.
Or I went to Louisiana, after I left Louisiana, Indiana, and now Arkansas, and I had them. I didn't have any in Indiana. I don't know why. But I've had them here too. Um, and they seemed all to be kind of related. Um, but before I tell you about the last ones, I want to go back to that reference to John Paul II, because when I was in Rome, the very first audience that I was to have with him is a general audience. He used to have an audience every Wednesday. When he was in Rome, he would meet with the people on Wednesdays. And there's this huge auditorium where he would have it. He wouldn't have it in St. Peter's Square. He would have it in this auditorium. In order to get into the general audience, you have to have a ticket. They don't charge you, but you do have to register to get ticket. You know what I mean? So you have to sign up. Since I was at the University of Dallas, they had a standing order for these tickets every semester. That there was you know what I mean? They'd look at the calendar and they'd say, okay, we want to go to the general audience here. They order them months and months out. They had to have the right number. Long story short, I missed the bus that day and I couldn't get in because it was a group ticket. They'd all already gone in. So I was kind of depressed. And I had my daughter, my goddaughter is also my little sister. One of my little sisters is my goddaughter. So I had a necklace for her to be blessed by the Pope because he does a general blessing of religious objects at the end. And I also had a gift for my mom, probably a crucifix, a necklace. And a friend of mine from UD saw me and she said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I missed the bus. I can't get in." She said, "Well, I'm with a special Japanese group," because she was Japanese. "Wait here because the a priest is coming to meet me." It was the Japanese translator for the Pope, which was one of the few languages. He could speak Japanese. He was a quick study. And he did speak Japanese that day. But this guy comes over and she explains and I had given her my religious articles. That's important to be blessed because I thought I wasn't going to be able to get in. And then he turns to me and in English, he says, "You've come to see the Pope." And I said, "Yes, but I can't get in." He said, "You must see the Pope. Follow me." So I'm following this guy. He goes over to one of the side entrances of St. Peter's Basilica. You've seen the 3 big doors, the ones on the left. Swiss guards there with their, you know, and they lift their things to him. He waves a hand like he's Obi-Wan Kenobi. The gate just open.
These are not the droids you're looking for.
Exactly. And then we walk through those. We hook a left down this hallway through another doorway. He waves his hand again. Gates come open, and he deposits me inside the audience hall.
Wow.
And he says, "All right, now you can see the Pope." Well, once you're inside the audience hall, it's divided down the middle inside, and you can't get from the left side to the right side or the right side to the left side. You have to come in either on this side or this side, and you have to exit that way.
Okay.
So I'm sitting there straining my neck looking for the group of UD students, right? Because I'm thinking I want to sit with them. and they're all the way on the other side, and I can't figure out how I'm going to get over there because there are these barriers. And over my left shoulder, I hear an Irish brogue say, "Is there something I can help you with, boy?"
Mm.
And I look, and it's a medieval monk with the tonsure and the robes, Brother Ambrose. My son Liam's middle name is Ambrose after this guy.
Okay.
And I said, "Look, I missed the bus today. I don't have a ticket. I got smuggled in here. I'll just stand here. It's okay." He said, "If you want to sit with your friends, I can show you how." And
I love this.
Yeah, I said, "Okay." And so he said, "Follow me." And so I follow this guy. He's like waddling in front of me, right? Um, it's like out of a movie. This is 1985, by the way. So I'm following him, and then he opens the door, and we go down 3 flights of stairs. And now I'm in caverns that are catacombing underneath the Vatican. And every 50 feet, there's a naked light bulb, right? And I'm just following him in silence. And then we get to the middle of nowhere down there. And he says, "Now, go to the end of this corridor and go to the right. Go all the way to the end of that corridor. Take a left, and you'll find some staircases. Go up, and you'll be on the other side of the audience hall. You can join your friends. And if anybody sees you, act like you don't understand Italian because you're not supposed to be here." And he just ran off into the darkness. So here I am in the Da Vinci Code, 10 years before the Da Vinci Code's even written,
Oh my gosh.
underneath, you know what I mean? Underneath the
Yeah.
back. And I make it to the other side.
This is fantastic. I love this.
Yeah. And I get to see the Pope. He speaks in 7 languages without notes. It's fantastic. Emotionally kind of exhausting. I don't get to shake his hand at the end when he comes down the aisle, because the nuns, they elbow you out of the way, and they get right there on the barrier. And so I wasn't going to fight the nuns. Um, and I was kind of exhausted when I got back to campus that day, and we didn't have classes. And so I went to take a nap. And I told you, I never take naps. I don't like taking naps because I'm a lucid dreamer. I don't get any rest. And, you know, but that day I was kind of emotionally drained just from the experience of being with this, he's such a charismatic person. I mean, the feeling when he was in the room was just insane.
Oh, I
Uh,
bet.
Same thing when I went to the mass that he did for university students in Rome. It was just in the basilica itself. So I fall asleep, and then when I wake up, my friend Noriko, my Japanese friend, is kneeling next to my bed,
Hmm.
and I'm like, startled. And she says, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, I didn't want to wake you, but I just got back. I got a personal audience with the Pope." I said, "You're kidding me."
Hmm.
She said, "Yeah, I didn't know it was going to happen, but that Japanese priest, he got me with this Japanese delegation from Tokyo, and then they
Wow.
they had a private audience, and I got to go with them." And she said, "And I told him about you." And
Hmm.
plus, she had the religious articles that she had taken from me for my goddaughter and my mom, right? And she was bringing them back to me. And she said, "And when he heard about you, he sent you this rosary ring." Okay. Rosary ring is a penal rosary like this one. It's got a decade on it and a crucifix. Okay.
Can you show the camera a little closer, just for the
Well,
audience?
this is a penal rosary. You guys can kind of see
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Okay.
I think I've
So
seen
imagine
it
this
all.
as a ring. Okay. Except with the crucifix turned flat, along the ring edge, like right here, right? It'll be like,
Sure, sure,
okay.
sure.
And what they're made for, I have a spinner ring right here. By the way, folks, my rings are for my girls. This is my bride. This is my Sophia. This is my Gracie. And I've got a spinner rosary ring here for my daughter Elizabeth. So I'm done with the rings. I'm not Johnny Depp. Um, not have any more girls. But at any rate, she said the Pope has a special blessing for you on this ring. And he just asked that if he doesn't want it, to give it to somebody else or to bury it, but don't just discard it. I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And it fit this ring finger right here. So I put it on. And you can see it in my wedding pictures because that's the hand that is around my bride's waist. It has the rosary ring on it. A couple weeks later, she got another audience with the Pope. He gave her a ring for my goddaughter, who's my second to youngest sister, Emily. And she brought it to me and she said, "Oh, he remembered that you were the godfather of your little sister, so he sent her a matching ring." So
How neat is that?
it was cool. It was cool. So I had my matching ring. Emily, I gave it to her for Christmas when I got back from Rome, and had it for years. And then after I got married, I was shutting the refrigerator door one day, and these rings are made of like tin and pewter. So they're cheap, right? They're not expensive. They're not nice jewelry. And the ring caught on an edge and it broke. And I took it to a jeweler to see if it could be repaired. They said there's nothing we could do for it. The metal's too soft. And I wasn't savvy enough to think, well, wait a minute, I should make it incorporate it into another piece of jewelry or something, right? I put it in a box, I put it in my desk, I lost the ring. Years later, Emily says, I noticed you don't wear your rosary ring anymore. And I said, Emily, I didn't want to say anything, but I broke it and then I lost it. She writes to the Pope, unbeknownst to me. And my mom calls me one day. I'm in Dallas and she's way down in South Texas. And she says, we just got a package from the papal nuncio in Rome that has a rosary in it from the Pope for you.
The Pope is just taking care of you. He's like, I got you, man.
He's been dogging me, right? And by the way, these are related. These are related to my experience of lucid dreaming. So I just want your audience to understand.
Yeah, it's going to tie in.
So I told my mom, I said, keep the rosary because I don't want to lose it, you know? And then, I finished my PhD. I'm in Louisiana. I have the experience with the chair. John Paul, that story about John Paul was shortly before he died. I'm principal of this Catholic school, and I quit as the principal. I got to finish my dissertation. I got to get out of here. I can't do all this anymore. And so I do. And on the very last day that I'm at that school, and it was not good circumstances, my quitting. Okay. It was tough. It was tough. It wasn't like a happy, thank you so much. It was bad. Okay. I had to quit. I couldn't work for these people anymore. So on my very last day, I'm leaving the building. I turned over my keys at the front door to the second to last person that was there besides me. And I'm walking to my car in the gravel parking lot. And by this time, John Paul had passed away. And something catches my eye in the gravel, glinting in the gravel on my way to my car. And I look down and it's the rosary ring in a random gravel parking lot in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And it's identical to the ring that I was given. And I think, all right, you know what I mean? All right, John Paul. But I try to put it on my finger and it's too small. So I'm like, all right, it's the same ring, right? But it's too small. It won't even fit on my pinky. All right. So I put it in my pocket of my jeans. We leave Louisiana. We move to Indiana. No lucid dreaming there.
Right.
But I lose the ring. Again. And I had this experience up there where this is the only time this ever happened to me. I have 5 kids, right? And my son Liam had just gotten out of kindergarten, and I started thinking, okay, that phase of my life is over. No more diapers. We get to clear that. You know what I mean? And then one night I came home from teaching night school, and my wife said, I think you better sit down. And I said, what? She said, I'm pregnant. Like every time I think I'm out, they pull me back in. So she was pregnant with my daughter, Sophia. And we had Sophia, my youngest. She just started in college, to give you guys an indicator of how old I am. And we moved to Arkansas, and she was about 2.5, 3 years old when we moved here. Hadn't started school yet. And we moved into this 3-story blue painted Victorian lady. The first house we lived in here. We were just renting it, right? But it was haunted with supposedly, right? It's got storied in this little town. And I had another one of my lucid dreaming episodes in this house where I'd fallen asleep on the couch and I woke up, I sat up again, front doors open, street light streaming in, and there are leaves strewn across the floor. I shut the door, I bolted, I go back and lay down on the couch. And this time I sat up again, and a flock of ravens flew from the top. There were like 11-foot ceilings in this house on the first floor. And a flock of them flew like straight through me. And I could feel it, right? I could hear them, and I could feel the wind. Just told that story recently, and my daughter Grace, who's my second oldest, she said, I remember that, Dad. And I said, what are you talking about? She said, I was asleep with you on the couch, and I saw it. I knew I was dreaming. But my daughter just recently told me, I remember that because I saw them too. And then you told me that I needed to go and get in my bed. And I did.
In the dream.
Yeah, but she was in my dream
Wow.
too. I mean, she dreamed it as well, is my point.
Yeah.
But I didn't even know this until just now, like just within the last year and a half. She said, I remember that, Dad. I said, what are you talking about? She said, I was on the couch with you. I remember those birds. They really scared me, but you weren't scared at all. You just said, it's okay, Gracie, go upstairs and get in your bed. And I did it. And that was it. So while we lived in that house, here's where it all ties together. Um, I'm sitting, in my office one day, and Sophia, maybe when she's 5 years old, so we've been here a couple of years, she comes to me and she says, Daddy, what is this? She holds up the rosary ring. And I said, where did you find that? And she said, it was on the nightstand next to my bed. And I realized, oh, it wasn't for me. It was for her. She wasn't even conceived yet.
Mm.
So that ring right now is around a necklace around her neck at A State where she's going to college. Because that's what we did with her. It was like, all right, I'm never losing this again. We're putting on this necklace and this is yours. This was from St. John Paul the Great to you. He left it for me in the parking lot in Baton Rouge, but it was for you. And so, which leads me to the next couple of episodes. I told you, when we started talking about The Exorcist, I told you when I pulled that movie back out, I was teaching film, right?
Yeah.
And I thought this isn't going to stand up. I'm going to watch it again. I waited until everybody was gone. It was a Sunday afternoon or something. I popped it in the DVD at my house because my wife had taken the kids to the zoo or like gone to Little Rock. And I put it in and it stands up,
Yeah.
right? It stands up. And I was just gobsmacked that it was so good and wasn't scary the way I thought it was gonna be scary. It's dreadful. But it's like we said in the last episode, it's not filled with jump scares and stuff. It's not cheap. It's not trying to get you. But it's trying to get you. So I watched it and so I said, all right, I'm gonna put this in my rotation because I don't show the same films every semester in my film class. I shake it up. And I was the guy that took Sophia to and from school every day, right? I have the college professor schedule, so I'm loosey goosey. My wife, she's an 8th grade teacher. She's got to be there by 7:20, So I was the one dropping Sophia off, picking her up at the end of school, giving her a Snickers bar, taking her home, taking care of her. The other kids are older; they can kind of take care of themselves at this point. And so we're driving back from school one day, and just randomly, I don't even know what we were talking about. She says, well, it's not like Mr. Howdy, gave it to you or anything. And I almost drove off the side of the road. I said, where did you hear that? She's like not even in middle school. She's like elementary, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th, I don't know. I said, where did you hear that name? And she said, I don't know. I said, don't ever let me hear you say that name again. She's like, all right, geez, you know what I mean? And I didn't explain it to her. I just said no. Because if your viewers and listeners don't know, that's what Reagan calls the demon, right?
Yeah.
In
Mr.
Exorcism.
Howdy.
Right. So later that afternoon, I'm the guy in my household that does the dishes. I like doing dishes, right? So I always just said to my wife, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it's part of my routine, right? And I was doing the dishes, cleaning the kitchen that afternoon, and we had a galley kitchen with a long red counter down one side of it, refrigerator on the other side. Not even enough room for a triangle. You know what I mean? Just like, and there's a little dining area down at the end of it, like with a breakfast nook. And the back door, which is glass, is west facing, and it was sunset, so the light is streaming through the kitchen. I'm not dreaming, by the way. This is all, I'm awake. And you know how when guys are like this, you know how when you get done with something, like you stand back And you're like, I did that. I don't care if you just, you know what I mean? If you just
Yeah.
mowed the lawn or you moved a box or you made the bed, there you have a moment of like just that miniature man pride, like, yeah, that's me, you know? And so I had that moment in the kitchen where I was looking back down, back down and I kind of could see in the slant of light that there was an area on the counter that I missed
Mm,
when I wiped it down,
mm,
right? Um, and so I walked down there with the cloth, and then I realized, wait a minute, that, and it was like grease on the counter, right? But somebody had written something. And so I slanted my head into the light so I could see what was written there. And I will not say the name, but it was the name of the demon from The Exorcist.
good grief. Got goosebumps.
So,
Woo.
all right. So that was the last one. So do you see why in my mind I'm like, okay, these things are all related. I have not had I in the 425 house, which is what we call it, which is where that happened. I didn't have a lucid dream again that's related to this. I didn't have another one in the house that we lived in after that or where we're living now. I haven't had one. Okay. Um, my son did though, as a Marine in Okinawa. And that's his story. But when he told me about it, he said this is the second time he's had a waking experience, but he was the one that had the dream. And again, he told me about it, and sure as shooting, front door open, light streaming through, and leaves in it. And he described that. And I'm like, I'm telling you. So I have a line in my novel, places aren't haunted, people are.
Mm,
Um, and I'm hoping to capitalize on that fictionally later. So that's my experience, and I think it goes back to the very beginning. Pay attention. So what does it mean for me? I've been dogged, and yet apparently John Paul's also been looking out for me too. And we Christians, we agree, right? There is a war going on
sure.
between the powers and principalities all around us. And as we said in the last episode, the devil's after everybody all the time. And I think that dreaming is one of those places. I think the film world traffics in this all the time. That the dreaming world is that world that where those doors exist. I don't know if that's the way you feel about it, but I do certainly. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I think that might tie into some of my dreams that I had. But
Yeah. Um, but I want to underscore this too. In all of these experiences that I've had, I've never, except for that one time, that second time, when there was that figure that seemed to be lifting up my bed,
right.
right? That I couldn't see. None of the other of these experiences were ever matters of fear.
Mm,
Like I have no fear at all. Once I recognized where I was and what was happening, that all that went away. And it was like, okay, I know what I'm looking at. But it took me a long time to figure out, well, why is this happening? Um, and so it keeps me mindful. My dreaming world keeps me mindful in the waking world.
yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense? And I think that's kind of the way you express what your experience was like too. Am I right?
Yeah. Yeah. And real quick before we dive into that, I mean, have you, what's your interpretation of the door being open, the light coming in? Have you had those thoughts, or would you be willing to share just like what you think, or is that just something?
I feel like it's all related to what my role is okay, so this is the way I think of myself and my own identity. Number one, I'm a husband
Hmm.
because that's the promise that I made,
Right.
right? Number two, I'm a father because that's what came next and that's what issued forth from the promise that I made.
Okay.
And then number three, I'm a professor, I'm a friend, you know what I mean? So that's the order in which, and I feel like now obviously this started before I was married, before I had children, right? But when I look at it, I think this is a reminder that I'm either leaving the door open or I'm opening.
Mm.
You see what I mean?
Hmm.
But in every one of the episodes where I notice that the door's open, what do?
Go close it.
I go and shut it, right? I
Hmm.
do look out, but I go and shut it. I don't invite more. I shut it, right? So maybe, I think of it as still stuff I got to work on. You know what I mean? Yeah, those of you who follow me on X will notice that sometimes I'll repeat, I said this at my father's funeral at his eulogy. I said, I don't know what a man is, but he keeps his promises. And so
Yeah.
I feel like the door opening is a reminder of me that I got to keep my promises. That it's vital that I keep my promises. Um, so I don't know. I may be right about that. I may be wrong about that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, because I think it's the leaves are interesting when I think about it.
Yeah.
Of it's something from outside that's coming into your house and would probably be decayed leaves.
Yes. Every time.
So yeah, so this decayed leaves, things that are on the ground, things that are decaying, maybe things that are dead,
Yeah.
almost, and then the winds bring them into your house.
Yeah.
So I interpret it as something that's probably more negative of this whatever it is entering into your house, right?
Yeah.
Because if you just left the door open, your house would just be full of these dead leaves,
Right.
which is interesting because then it's if that happened enough, then your house would almost seem like would become less of a house,
Yeah.
be more of a collection of decaying things potentially, or spiders, different kinds of animals
Exactly.
making a home in your home.
Yeah. And we talked about this in the last episode too, just in reference to the kind of ways that we have to notice or combat evil. Sometimes evil does a frontal assault, like
Right.
in The Exorcist, and we have to confront it. We have to have the kind of bravery that you need to confront it. But in all other ways, it's always passive. It's always soft. It's always the enticement by the thing that is beautiful or the thing that is best.
Maybe
Um,
that's the light too that's shining in.
exactly, or shining on. You know what I mean? I
Hmm.
don't. I don't know. But again, to me, it's a reminder that you do have to remind yourself that you're a spiritual being, and the devil's after everybody all the time. Um, and it's something, that you can't just ignore. I don't think you need to become obsessed with it. It's not, you know what I mean? But I do think it's something that's one of the reasons I still wear these, because it's just that little reminder. It's almost medieval in the sense because they scratch my wrist. I'm always fiddling with them. You know what I mean? Um, but I did that on purpose because I need those things. I need those things because it's too easy to become distracted by the stuff that gets in.
That's true. Yeah,
Um,
that's true. Like we need remember my therapist brought this up to me one time where I basically graduated through some progression that we set up. And he said you need to have some kind of totem that reminds you of this. And my little brother bought me this. It was for my birthday 2 years ago, a Monte Cristo cigar. And the Count of Monte Cristo is a story I just love, and it
my wife
it
too. Yeah,
it fits in, I think, with my life or how I perceive things as, instead of just being so vengeful, to actually uh live a good life and ultimately drop that vengefulness, like that's gonna tear me up,
right,
and choose and be like, hey, you have this, right? I think in the movie, I like the movie a lot too, but I think at the end of the movie, his sidekick, I'm trying to remember his name, is Zara or
hmm
something like that.
yeah,
He basically, you could tell that Jim Caviezel's character, the Monte Cristo, he's so hell bent on getting revenge, right?
yeah,
And his sidekick guy that's helping him out is saying, hey, like you have your woman now, you have the riches,
yeah,
all this stuff, right? And it's like he can tell that it's driving him down this path, but at the same time he's got like a plan to where it all works out at the end, and at the end it's a happy ending and all that stuff. But that's like my totem. It's up there that I have it, and it helps remind me of the best revenge you can get is a life well lived, you know.
absolutely. And to reference another film too, what I was put in mind of was Lord of the Rings, not just least of all because the rosary ring of
Right,
mine
right,
and
right.
changing sizes and stuff.
Yeah, and being
But
lost and then being found. It's
But you know,
interesting.
the Lord of the Rings, every one of the characters, if you've read the books, and I recommend it highly, but if you've read the books, there is a moment when Sam becomes the ring bearer.
Right, right.
And the ring tries to exert its power over him, and Sam's response to it is puzzlement. I mean, his emotional and psychological and spiritual reaction to it is, what is this?
Mm,
Right?
yeah.
And so in my mind, I just connected that to my experience. Most of us are not Sam. Most of us are not enticed by evil things, and we look at it with puzzlement and bemusement like we have no interest in it at all. Most of us are riddled with weaknesses, chinks in our armor, right? And so we
Yeah,
have all
like
this
pressure points. Yeah.
yeah, so Boromir is very attracted to the idea of wielding the power that the ring represents in order to beat the devil with his own arm, and has to be warned that's not going to work. You know what I mean? That's not going to work. And then you get all the way to the end of the Lord of the Rings, and it's made plain to you because it's Sam that we get to follow home to see Rosie with their baby, and he says, "Well, I'm back," and that's what it's all about. The whole reason to fight the whole war is for that, is to preserve that. But not all of us get to be that. Some of us are going to end up being Aragorn or Frodo or Bilbo or Pitiful Golem, right?
Yeah, yeah. I was
Or
Golem at times for sure.
yeah, yeah. And so to me, I don't know. That's the way I interpret these lucid dreams, is that I am being spoken to, and it is from the spiritual world, and it's an admixture of two things. It's God, but it's also one of the minions who is very, very keenly interested in the disposition of my soul and the souls in my care. Um, so I take it seriously. But it doesn't frighten me because I know what it is.
Yeah, you're aware of it. You're aware
Yeah.
of it. Oh, wow. That was a great tie into Lord of the Rings too. Yet I always love those nuggets
Yeah.
there.
Well, it's the weird way my brain works. It's chock full of stuff and it just makes connections. I mean, so
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing. You mind if I dive into my dreams?
no, no, no. That's what I was trying to segue. I was trying to get you to go there. So
It's
yeah.
just also interesting. So it's interesting as you were talking, I actually wrote down too, my aunt told me this is a dream that basically intersects, like you were saying, with reality.
Mhm.
So I might share that later too, potentially after I share my dream, because it's a really interesting story. Uh, but I will start with when I was younger, when I was in high school. I moved down into the basement of my house, and it's like a three-level house. You got your basement, main floor, upstairs.
Okay.
And I used to live upstairs with my parents, or not with them, but we were all on the
Right.
same level basically, to where they had their room, and then it was me for a bit, and then when my little brother was born, we had like bunk beds, and then I have two sisters, one older, one younger. They were
Right.
across the hallway. One thing that I really love, a memory that I love, is we used to listen to audio tapes all the time. I might have said this on the last podcast potentially, but something I love is my dad had this big cassette player, and it was like a hallway closet where they had like towels and linens and stuff, and there was three uh, shelves that you'd have to like crawl up on as a kid to like get
Yeah.
to the top to switch the tapes, and we would take turns as siblings being like, okay, it's your turn, you got to switch the tape, all that. But oh my gosh, I loved it. Some of the stories I remember was Frog and Toad. Loved Frog and Toad, Arnold Lobel. Those were great stories.
Right.
We listened to a lot of Mark Twain. Mark Twain had these short stories. One of my favorites was the Marvelous Jumping Frog of Calaveras County.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great one. And then there was one that was like Punch Brothers, Punch with Care, Punch in the Presence of the Passenger or something. It was some kind of he had all these different types of like little short stories that were fascinating, and we would just like listen to them all the time. So they're still like stuck in my mind. And then when Harry Potter came out, Jim Dale did such a great job narrating that book.
Yeah.
I do remember one time being absolutely terrified. I was sleeping, and then I think it was one of the passages where Voldemort's trying to get into Harry's mind, and Jim Dale does such a great job narrating all these characters, and it's just this blood curdling scream of Harry being like, and I
Yeah.
remember waking up being like, "Oh my gosh, like what is happening?" You know, I still remember that to this day. It was just like, "What the heck?" East of the Sun, West of the Moon always scared me. It was just very elemental and it was very eerie and stuff.
Mm,
But anyways, so we all lived on the same level, right? And then I think as I was getting older, we had like a computer room that I was on the main level for a bit, which is it's kind of interesting to think places you are in the house and maybe how that affects you as you're maturing,
right.
right? Because when you're younger, you want to be close to your parents, right? If you have a bad dream or just so they can check on you and
Right.
stuff, right? And then as I was getting older, I was almost like descending into different levels. Yeah, which is interesting because that's like as my porn was becoming more of my part of my life, I was becoming more separated from
More
God.
isolated.
Yeah,
Right.
I was like isolating, which is I've never thought about that till now. But basically, when I was going into high school, I thought I hit the lottery because I lived in the basement. But the basement always scared me. It was unfinished, so it was like wood floors. There were some really great times I had in the basement. My dad and I are very tied in together through basketball,
Hmm.
right? Like he played college. He had all these great stories. I looked up to him so much with basketball, and he was my
Right.
coach. He was such a good coach too, just with the kids and everything. Like such a great like person to be around. You know, he
Right.
never got involved with the parent stuff. He would switch up the starters like every game because he's like, you got to know how to play off the bench.
Yeah.
But he did it in a way which wasn't like, okay, you're in for 5 minutes, you're out, that kind of thing. He was
Right.
just very strategic. Like if it was a player that wasn't that good, it's not like they're in the game the whole time. But
Right.
he wanted to give that kid the experience to play,
Yeah.
because hey, like everyone should have a chance to play when they're
That's
that
what the
age.
league is for.
Yeah, and that's what he understood, and he
Yeah.
understood basketball so well, and how it helped him in his life because
Yeah.
his dad passed away of brain cancer when he was going into high school,
Right.
and I think basketball was something for him that was just therapeutic, and anyways, so we had some really good memories in the basement. I remember the first time he had like this plywood backboard that he like nailed to the staircase, and he had an actual basketball rim, like a real life basketball rim that he
Right.
screwed in there. And I just love dunking. I love Michael Jordan, Dominique Wilkins, all these dunkers,
Right.
So he's in the other room like watching a Bulls game, and I just jump up and like do a tomahawk dunk like Dominique Wilkins, who was my favorite player. I was just like, ah, and I pulled the rim off, or I pulled the whole thing off because
Yeah.
I was like a power dunker at this little age. And he came in the room. I had the rim on my chest like this, and I was like trying to get it off. And then my
Right.
dad, went back and he like really bolted it in. And then we would go to the furnace room, and I'd put my finger on the furnace because there was dust on the furnace,
Right.
and he'd measure my vertical jump, and
Oh.
he'd make like a note like Mac, like 1998, this is his vertical. So then I was always just trying to like get higher and higher,
Right.
and then eventually when I first dunked, that was going into sophomore year, I was like so pumped. I was like, Dad, I dunked, I did it. I'm in this different world now.
Right.
But why I bring that up is even when we were having these great moments, when the lights turned off, I would like just run upstairs. Like, I just did not like being down there alone, especially
Right.
when it was dark. There was just something about it.
Yeah.
And as I was going into high school, I started to have these dreams where I was like in paralysis. I couldn't move. And it was like this corner of the basement that was really dark. The
Yeah.
whole thing was dark, but oh, man, just thinking about it now, it would sometimes invade other dreams I was having, like lucid dreams
Right.
I was having. So I was having like I'd have this dream that I loved. I loved snakes when I was growing up and fishing, and it was like all these different kind of like a botanical garden almost,
Hmm.
and it had all these different places you could go, like, hey, if you want to catch snakes, because I used to do that with my dad all the time. We'd go out and we'd go across the street. There's this lake. It used to be this old farm, and I remember there used to be fences that my buddies and I would hop over, and then they made it all public. But
Right.
we'd hop over, and there's these concrete blocks that basically were the dam for the lake, and we'd flip them over and catch snakes and stuff. So in my dreams, I'd have these moments where I'd go to this place and it was like paradise. You know, you could just catch whatever snakes you wanted or go fishing. But then it just take like one little thought about this dark spot in the basement and it would start to invade the dream and like take it over. So
Hmm.
where it basically ended with me being in paralysis and not knowing what to do and feeling like there's like this demonic energy and it would take over my dreams and they really frightened me. Like I'd go to bed just be like, don't think about this. Like don't think about it. Whatever you do, just don't think about it. And sometimes that would work,
Yeah.
but I wasn't really in control of it, right? And that was mainly like when I was at their house in high school, and then I don't think I really had it as much in college. I think I'd have it sometimes if I was staying over, like if it was a holiday or something, and
Right.
if I was staying over, it'd come back. So it was really tied to the basement. And the interesting thing about the basement was really that's like where my porn addiction like was given the most fuel was when I was in the basement,
Right.
and that ended up being like my bedroom, right?
Right.
So it was really interesting to think about that because it was like this presence in the basement that I had since I was a kid. And then it started to flare up really like when my porn addiction was flaring up and when I was dissociating more from my faith and not as connected with my faith.
Right.
So really interesting, okay? So then I'm gonna tell you three dreams that I had, and they were all within I think the last one I had was probably about 6 months ago, but they were all within, I would say, like the past year
Okay.
and some change. So basically, I was staying at my parents' house in the RV, and I spent a little bit of time in their basement, but mainly in the RV. I was finalizing the divorce, like the divorce finalized, but the we ended up settling
Hmm.
financially. She bought me out of the house, so we were figuring out all that stuff, and we had to meet each other like multiple times, right? To
Right.
thank God, I mean, thank God that it was amicable and she's
Right.
doing well and it's great. But definitely was in this spot where it was affecting my emotions. There were times in my recovery coach knows this, like leading up to that point, I would just have times where I just feel really tempted to look at porn because of these feelings I was having of
Yeah.
just reminded of the divorce, reminded of the pain. It's a lot. It's a lot to go through in life. For anybody listening that's gone through one or is
Times
going
of
through one.
weakness and frustration.
Yeah, times of weakness and frustration, reflection, shame, guilt, all that stuff, it would creep up. And I've gotten a lot better at that. And it really kind of got better after these dreams that I had, which is
Right.
interesting. But basically, I was in the RV uh, next to my parents. Basically, have this slot that I can perfectly back into, which is just such a cool thing, like really cool. I remember when I first bought my RV, my dad is like, "I think this spot was here for a reason."
Yeah.
Because it's just he used to put his boat there, and my parents are great. I mean, they've been married for over 35 years and just the most supportive people. Like always have a home there if I need to go there. And that's how their home's always been, not just for us kids, but family members like
Right.
cousins. People can just
Yeah.
stay there and feel at home. So basically I go to sleep, and I think at the time was around the time I got baptized again. So I got baptized, and I felt this pull like with the church where they put on these baptisms, and I was like, I want to go in as an adult
Hmm.
and like recommit myself to Christ.
Right.
That's how I was feeling, was I want to recommit myself to Christ, and I did. And it was around that time was when I had my first dream that I had. So basically, in this dream, we're at my parents' house, and it's like my whole family, basically, like my sisters, my brother, my parents, and this is going to sound weird. Again, you described like trying to explain a dream that just
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. But basically,
Right.
there was a guy like trying to kill us, and he was in a car, and somehow he's driving this car like in the backyard, and there's like steps and all these different levels where a car probably wouldn't, you know,
Right.
a car is not going to be able to do the things that it did in real life in my dream. But I
Right.
digress. So what happened was this guy, we kind of know he's trying to kill us, so we go into the garage, and I love my dad, but he has so many things in the
Mhm.
garage, right? He's a
Right.
guy, he literally recycles paper towels, which I just think is hilarious. But
Yeah.
it's cool. That's who he is. He finds, I think, value in things that people don't find valuable.
Right.
But he has just about every tool you could imagine. And typically he knows right where it is, even though there's a lot of stuff. But basically, we're in this kind of cluttered garage, right, in the third car, and this guy has us pushed up against the wall,
Okay.
like we're pinned by this car. And in my dream, the whole time, I'm like, this is like a demonic force.
Right.
Like this is a person that's like possessed that's trying to kill us. And my dad, he had a piece of rebar and he stabbed it through the windshield and he killed the guy. And but in the dream, I knew this wasn't enough. I knew it wasn't enough. So in my dream, I summoned the Bible. I summoned the power of Christ because I knew like once this guy dies, there's going to be something even
Something.
more.
Right.
And in the dream, I felt the paralyzing force of this demonic entity that was probably haunting me throughout this time I was in the basement. Throughout this time I was addicted to porn. This force that was like a gravitational thing that was just
Right.
pulling me in and basically controlling other aspects of my life, right? When we think about the dreams I was telling you about with fishing and going outdoors and snakes, all these natural things that are passions of mine, right? This force would always enter and like take it over
Right.
and like pull it away from me and then suck
Right.
me into this, right? In this dream, man, I felt terrified, but when I called upon God, I said, "Get out.
Yeah.
You're not welcome here. Get out. Leave my family alone." And I said, "In the name of God,
Yeah.
leave. Get out." And it was so cool in this dream because I felt paralyzed, but as I started to speak and use the name of the Lord, my power grew. And I literally like exorcised this demon out of my dream.
Yeah.
I said, "Be gone," in this dream, right? And I wake up and I feel like, did that just happen?
Yeah.
Did I just confront this demon that's been haunting me and that's attached to this house and in some ways attached to my family, right?
Hmm.
And I did. And it was powerful, man. Like it was a really powerful moment for me. I look back on that. There's so much value and insight about myself that I gathered at that moment when I woke up and in the dream too. That when
Yeah.
I call upon God, when I'm in tune with him, when I'm connected with him, whatever evil there is, it's not going to stand up,
Right.
basically. So that was the first dream I had, and I think it was maybe a month or two later, somewhere around that, I had this other dream. So the dreams, they get more subtle, which is
Right.
interesting because that ties into the conversation we had just a few days ago about the direct attacks, the subtle attacks.
Yeah.
So that first one was like very direct, right? Like
Yeah.
someone's trying to murder my family. And I think I look back on that too as like my dad being that like physical protector.
Yeah.
And then I looked at myself as bringing in like the spiritual element of it as well. The second dream, I'm alone. I'm in some house. I don't really quite know what house this is, but there's these two attractive women, and they're really trying to get me to come into the basement with them. And they're really like being so like suggestive and over the top in some ways, but they're playing on this my weak point, which is like sexuality, like with porn and in the past with like hooking up with people. They're playing on that fantasy, I think, of and I've had those fantasies before, like where like two women will bring you somewhere, right? Like that's been a
It's Mitch and Eyes Wide Shut.
yeah. And it's a pornographic thing, I think, too, of like having
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
threesome or whatever.
Yeah.
Like growing up as a kid, like in high school, college, I mean, that's like what everything was geared towards with
Yeah.
not even like with porn, but just like Hollywood.
Yeah.
Was just some guy and like two women completely just want him so bad that
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever, which is kind of nuts to think about. I'm sure that happens some places, but I don't think it's often like a how it's portrayed in
Right.
Hollywood, right?
Right.
Um, but anyway, so I'm having this dream and they basically pull me in, like I didn't really want to go in the basement, but they start pulling me down the stairs, right? Like two of them. And I'm like resisting them, like I don't want to. And the lights are off in the basement. Okay. So I have the idea. I'm like, I'm gonna turn the light on. I switch the light on. These beautiful women, their faces start to transform into scary, demonic looking faces. Like they start to twist
Right.
and their voices start to change. And it becomes more apparent who they are and what they are. So I like push them off
Right.
and I slam the door, I lock it, and that's the end of the dream. They're like screaming, like get down here, and like banging on the door, and I leave the house basically. So that's that dream, right? So it's more subtle,
Right.
but I turn the light on, and it's interesting, right? Because I'm going into the basement.
Right.
And the interesting thing about it too is the first dream was like basically would have been like the mid level of the house.
Right.
Maybe that is related to how I was kind of like at the mid level. And then this dream's more about the basement, which is more seductive.
Or pulling you back down into the basement.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pulling me back down the basement. So this third dream, man, this one is the shortest one, the most subtle, but also I think the most like definite in my mind was interesting. So then this one was a couple months after. I'm in a bar, okay? I'm feeling pretty good. I see this woman looking at me. Uh, and this woman was an actress that when I had my last relapse, I mean, gosh, I was just looking stuff up about her.
Hmm.
And she's really famous actress. And she's in my dream. She comes up to me. I think I'm sitting at the bar. She comes up to me and she looks beautiful, of course, right? All this stuff.
Right.
And she's basically saying, "Hey, like want to come back home with me," but giving off that energy, but not really saying it.
Right.
But basically in the dream, I'm like, yeah, like if I wanted to, I could go back home with her. And it was, I cut it off. Like I didn't even give any room, any quarter. I said, I actually have this woman in my life that I really love. She's my girlfriend. I'm not interested. End of dream. And it wasn't even like she turned demonic or anything, but I was like, no, I'm not
Right.
interested. Bam. And that one was like the most realistic dream
Yeah.
because that one just felt like so like I had it in the back of my mind, hey, you could say yeah. But I'm like, would I do that in real life? No, I would not. Absolutely not. The response I gave in my dream was the same exact response I've given in real life before.
Right.
Where it's not even like I'm not even worried about it. I'm not even like, oh man, should I have said yes?
Yeah.
I'm just like, no. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't it's like the whole Sam thing. I'm like, no, like I don't even like I don't care. Like
Right.
this has no place in my life. Like there's no temptation. There is a temptation, but it doesn't have any roots to it. It's like trying to root into like a stone. It's like, no, it doesn't work.
Well,
And
I'm
yeah,
interested in one thing that you said because I think I'm reading all kinds of things into all three of these,
yeah,
and also into the levels. Right. So the first dream that you describe is more like that frontal outside force attacking,
right.
and the danger isn't just to you; it's to your family. Right. And then the second one is it seems to me again more subtle in one way, but takes on the form of instead of a direct assault, it's a temptation, right? That begins to lead you back to that place, right? But you throw the light on it, right? You throw the light, you turn the light on, and of course, evil thrives in darkness, right? And so when the lights come on, it reveals what it is you're actually dealing with. It reveals that what you're being tempted by is actually ugly. It's the opposite of beauty. It's the opposite of what it's masquerading to be. Um, but then in the third one, your moment of temptation is with the feeling that if you wanted to, you could. And that makes you proud.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a stroke of the ego, right? So speaking of the levels and exterior interior, which one is the one where the battle that you win is inside yourself? It's the third one.
Yeah,
And the second one is you with the soft temptation of it would be very easy to just slide right back, and you resist that. Whereas your dad ends up being an example of that physical rejection that physical rejection, because it's him with the rebar that does the thing that you should have done from the very beginning, but you didn't do it. So I don't know. I think that's fantastic. Um, and again, is your experience like my experience, where once you when you're having these dreams and you're aware that you're dreaming, do you remember the other ones? Like, is it connected? Do you recognize it as all, this is all the same world, even though the backyard's got stairs in it, and
Yeah.
this is definitely my house, but it's not configured right. But you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, I think there were times in these dreams where I would recall how I handled the last situation
right. Which goes back
as
to what I said about Descartes saying we can't recall our dreams in our dreams. And yet lucid dreamers, I think, do, in a weird way. Difference between yours and mine is that every time I'm lucid dreaming, there is not one difference between the real room that I'm sleeping in and the room that I awake dreaming in. It's
mm,
exactly the same. I don't ever have any weird experience. Like, okay, moment from The Exorcist. I don't know if you noticed this. This was not a continuity error, but when Reagan's mother finds the crucifix in her bedroom,
yeah, 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 yeah.
and she picks it up and she brings it to the servants and says, "Did you, brings it to her assistant? Did you put this in her room?" Everybody says no. It's at that moment that the doorbell rings, and it's the first time Kinderman shows up.
Right, the detective. Yeah.
Um, and as she's walking across out of the kitchen into the entryway so that she can answer the door, she puts that crucifix on a little stand that's next to a chair in
Mm,
that sitting
mm,
room. Okay. And I think it's Kinderman. I think it's that same. I'll have to go back and look, but she walks across the room and you see her put it down on the table, and then there is an exchange between them. And when she turns back around and walks back past that table, the crucifix is gone.
oh, I didn't notice that.
So I don't have any of those kinds of experiences in my dream. You know what I mean? Where, like, my son, when he told me the dream that he had, he mentioned that a statue that we have of Saint Teresa, which is on my front stoop right now, um, was in the TV room. Like, he was in the TV room in that house, right? Everything was the same, except that for some strange reason, the statue of Saint Teresa had been moved to the mantle in the fireplace in the TV room.
Mm,
And then when he turned and looked through the other living, because there's two living rooms in that house, the door was open and the light was spilling
mm,
through. And I'm like, I know he's heard those stories from me too. So you could account for the fact that he's having a duplication of images, right? In his dream that but then he had his experience in Okinawa, and he reported that to me over the phone. And that one was not a dream. That was it was real, and it was really, really scary. But I'm like, hey, I firmly believe that this can be generational too.
mm.
You know, and look, I take Chesterton wrote this in some place. He said, at least the thief compliments the person that he burgles, because in taking your stuff, he's saying you have good taste. You know what I mean? Um, and so there's a part of me too that feels like, look, if they're after me, in a way, that's a compliment.
Yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean? It's a
yeah.
reinforcement that no, we are good, and the enemy wants to ruin us for a reason. And so I don't know. That to me is an invigorating thought.
Can I, yeah, to circle back, which is really interesting, was that's something that my porn recovery coach, she's also a pastor, and then my therapist who went to Colorado Christian, so he's got a Christian background. Something that they both told me, which is really interesting, was that the more that you talk about this subject of porn, the more that you dive into it, the closer you get to unveiling what it is, right?
Yeah.
There's going to be more that the enemy's going to throw your way to tempt you. There's going to be more energy, and which was really interesting because I remember where I was when my therapist first told me this was when I was just getting back to Colorado,
Right.
and I was in a King Supers parking lot, supermarket, and it was like raining really hard, and I remember we had our therapy call, and he told me these things, and I think at the time I didn't quite realize it like I should have. And then my last relapse was like 2 months after that,
Hmm.
because it was what would have been the anniversary of my sixth wedding anniversary.
Hmm.
And it was my first time being alone on Thanksgiving, which was right around the time. It was like the day after Thanksgiving, basically, or
Right.
2 days after, or the day after was the anniversary, and then I think it was the day or two after was when I had my relapse, my last one that I've had. And yeah, man, I just remember that when I had that relapse and everything, it was something I was thinking about. It was like, yeah, man, like you have to armor up as you're talking about these things, right? Because they are the enemy doesn't like that when you're actually sharing the truth about what this is and
That,
how it's
I was going
affecting
to
you.
say that too. In the dreams that you've recited here, you know, when you talk about the first one, that's the response of a demon in anger because you're actually winning.
Right.
And then there is there's a change in tactics. Let me see if I can get him this way, right? And then there's the third one. Well, what about? And so to me, it's a sign when the tactics gets changed, when the strategies get changed, it's because you are actively resisting, you're actively fighting, you're actively, and it might be a sign that you're actually winning. Um, but yeah, I'm sure your therapist and your pastor have told you this too. Um, you never can be sure of total victory. So you can't, that goes with Christ. It's not something for you. You have to continue the struggle.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's not going to be over. It's gonna manifest itself, in some other way. Um, and I think as spiritual beings, we have to. This is one of the reasons we Catholics, I try to stay in the habit of going to mass, um, and stay committed to that. Even on days when I don't, those Sundays
Right.
that I don't feel. I grew up Catholic, gotta go to church. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. Our,
Um,
our our church always had the worst AC,
yeah.
so people would faint. I had one person that fainted on me. So yeah, I'd have that feeling going to church too. I'm like, oh no.
But the other part of me too is that it's my great reminder that it's not. On the one hand, I say at the end of the Lord of the Rings, you say, and that's what it's all about, right? But it's my reminder. I'm like, I don't know how people don't. I don't know how people live without this kind of reminder that it's not all about you, that you play a role, that you, right? But like this, the whole meaning of the whole story is way bigger, than whatever little role you're going to play. And to me, that's humbling, and that is it's like a reset. You know what I mean? It's like a reset. Um, I think that's the big danger of the world that we live in, that we have, we've turned, the center of being is no longer I am who am's. It is I think therefore I am, which puts us at the center of everything. And I used to get this feeling when I was teaching at LSU. I taught a large enrollment section for non-English majors of Romantic, Victorian, and early modern poetry.
Hmm.
And I taught it 3 semesters in a row, and there were 80 kids in this class, 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And it was actually designed for those non-English major engineering students who realized, oh my gosh, I've got a humanities elective I got to get done this semester or I'm not going to graduate. So this class filled up every time. But here was the weird part about it. And my dissertation director mentioned this to me because the auditorium that I was teaching in was in Allen Hall on the first floor, and it had glass windows on one side of it into the hallway. And so if you're walking up and down during class, you could peek over to your right or to your left and you could see me on a stage lecturing to 75 kids. And, Boehner told me one day, he said, there's some professors in the department that are asking about you. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, they're walking Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. They're walking through the hallways in Allen on the first floor. And they're telling me that you have 80 kids in that class every time you meet it.
Hmm.
And they want to know, what the hell are you doing?
Right.
Because these are non-English majors who's, reading Alexander Pope, reading Coleridge, reading late Victorian poetry. And, I thought about it for a while. I didn't have an answer for him. I said, well, I don't know. I can't, I don't know. Um, But I thought about it later, and I realized that what I was seeing when I looked out into those faces was a bunch of kids that their entire lives had been told that it was all about them. And they had gotten to that point in their lives where they were realizing that can't possibly be true. It's got to be something bigger than me. Because that's a lot of weight to put on your shoulders, isn't it?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've had times in my life, in my past marriage, where
Yeah. And I
you're
that was
carrying
the
all
only
that
thing I could
weight.
come up with. It was like, wow, what if the reason that they keep coming back to this class is that I'm a reminder that they've been lied to their whole lives, that it's not all about them. That's the thing that you're mistaken for the thing. That's not it. That's not it at all, as T.S. Eliot says in the love song of Jail for Proof Rock. That's not what I meant at all. Um, it's like I said to my students when I was principal of that school. They say, "Man, if God would just send me a message, then I would be okay."
Hmm.
And I look at him and I say, what if he's sending you a message every moment that you're awake and you miss it?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Totally.
uh, so that's, to me, that's the, if we had to end on a note of like what's the moral to the whole story, to me that's it. Is that I have a role to play. I've made my promises. I have to keep those promises. I got to armor up, right? And it's not just, I'm going to be tempted and it's all based on my own weaknesses. Yes, those are the ones that are going to be exploited, right? And the reason that we're talking about dreaming is that dreaming constitutes a time when you are, I think, you're most vulnerable.
Yeah.
But if you can develop the capacity to recognize the situation that you're in, then as you and I have talked about in our experience, there are things you can do. Um, in fact, let me end with this little anecdote about Mother Teresa. At the end of her life, Mother Teresa was suffering from heart ailments, and she was a great friend of Pope John Paul II's, and he wanted her to submit to open heart surgery. And nobody knew about this, by the way, until long after it had been done. So she finally agreed to the surgery, which I think she actually had in Seattle, Washington. Okay. And was secretly flown from what was then called Calcutta to Seattle for the surgery.
Hmm.
But Pope John Paul II, if my memory serves, if the details of the story are right in my head, insisted that she undergo an exorcism before she was put under for the surgery.
Wow.
And the reason I bring that up is because exorcism is not merely a rite of deliverance. And I have a friend, and by the way, I put her in my novel for this reason. She wrote a dissertation. This is the woman that introduced me to my now wife. Okay, she's the godchild of my oldest son. I mean, the godmother of my oldest son. Her husband's the godfather. He's the one that convinced me to come to LSU for my PhD. Very great friends, very, very dear and important to our family. And Kathleen wrote her dissertation on the novels of Toni Morrison.
Hmm.
And she had to coin a term to talk about some of the features in that novel. And the term that she coined was apotropaic, which is a sort of a combination of Greek roots that means a warding off. Okay. Which I found to be perfect for what the rite of exorcism is also. It is a rite of warding off, it's a rite of protection. And so in my novel, for instance, my father Rose performs a portion of the apotropaic rite of exorcism in the home of my main characters, not because they're possessed by demons, but as a protection against the openness or the weaknesses that we have that might open that door. um and I didn't know about that for a long time. I mean, a lot of people didn't know about it, but we found out about it after Mother Teresa died, and then somebody told a story that, yeah, they had spoken to the exorcist that actually performed it. And of course, your first thought is, why would Mother Teresa, of all people, saint, right, need to be exorcised? Well, it's not just for what you think it is. It's not just for deliverance. It's also for protection.
Yeah,
Uh,
because she's at like the tippy top.
Right.
spiritually.
And when would you be your most vulnerable? I don't know if you ever been put under for surgery?
Hmm.
I mean, when you wake up from being put under, it's the weirdest experience looking back on what your memory of that was.
Oh, I
Because
actually have a
it
story about that, but keep
okay,
going.
go ahead.
Okay, so this is really interesting because this might play a little bit into the lucid part, dreaming part, or whatnot. But my last surgery I had actually was last year. Oh man, so my grandpa that I never got to meet. He was a ski patrol leader at A
Mhm.
Basin in Colorado, just complete stud, geologist, used to fly planes. Would have been cool to meet him. But anyways, my dad grew up skiing, and he could still do like black diamonds today, in his
Right.
jeans and stuff. And he doesn't. We didn't really ski a lot as a family. Uh, I think both like financially, and then
Right.
also we were just always doing sports.
Right.
But have other cousins that they grew up skiing, and they are crazy how they knew how to do it. But basically, before my divorce, we decided, hey, what a great idea to, hey, let's try skiing together. Maybe that will, help fix things, or bring us together or whatnot. And it was the first time we went out. We were at Breckenridge, and I haven't skied for a while, and we ended up going on a blue, and it was just really slick and icy. And what happened was both my ex and I bought new ski gear, all this stuff. So we had skis that were new,
Right.
and what we learned after the fact was with skis, if you're like a beginner skier or like moderate or whatever, they're supposed to detune them so you can kind of grip the snow better when you
Oh, I
turn.
got you. Right.
But if you're really advanced, they don't really touch the skis when they come out of the box. Like they're just super slick, and that way you can just really just fly
Right.
on them.
Right.
So in
You guys
hindsight,
got the expert skis.
yeah, they didn't do anything, and it was crazy. We went back that day to the place in Colorado Springs. We're like, "What the heck?" And the
Yeah.
guy that owned it was super pissed because I think his younger workers just totally just, you
Blew
know,
it. Yeah.
blew it. And then he took it upon himself to do it for us. But
Right.
anyways, it was that run I tore my meniscus for the third time, which that was a high school injury I had playing basketball
Right.
that I missed some seasons of football and basketball. So at that point, it just really sucked because the relationship wasn't going well. It's kind of before we decided to get divorced, and then I tore my meniscus, right? So it
Yeah.
was just that huge humble pie. Gosh, I've had a lot of humble pie servings in my life, but that was another one, like a physical humble pie serving. So, yeah, so I got my surgery last year. I finally got it done, and that was like right around the time I started dating my girlfriend Cassie.
Right.
And I remember going into the surgery when we were prepping for it. They're like, "Hey, we're just going to do a scope, right? We're going to go in there and we're going to remove all the excess debris, all that stuff." And that was my second surgery I had in my life was a scope. And the first surgery I had was meniscus repair, and it was awful. Like I was a sophomore in high school. It was so painful. It
Yeah.
was crazy. I think I was taking Oxycontin at the time. That was like my only memory really of having something that was just very freaky. Was I was conscious and I was on Oxycontin at the time. I went to go to the bathroom, I crouched over and I looked at myself in the mirror, and my face in the mirror smiled at me,
Yeah.
and I wasn't smiling. And I
Right.
was like, "Whoa." So I had some interesting memories from that time. Like it was
Yeah.
just an awful time. I think I had to pee in a cup for a while because I just couldn't really get up. It
Yeah.
was just crazy. Anyways, I'd wake up in the middle of the night just in searing pain. So that was my first surgery. Second surgery, my dad and I actually got surgery on the same day, same doctor, and
Wow.
wheeled out in the,
Yeah.
and both those times I you just kind of remember waking up and you're all groggy. Well, the
Yeah.
third time, it was literally like planning it. They're like, "Hey, we're going to do a scope," and I'm like, "Okay, cool, whatever."
Yeah.
And then literally the day of the surgery, the guy's like, "Well, I want your permission if we do have any kind of way that we can repair your meniscus to do so."
Oh, okay.
So then that brought back all these thoughts I had. I'm like, oh. So I had to mentally prepare myself
Right.
literally the day of surgery of like, this is going to go one or two ways.
Yeah.
It's either going to be like a surgery I can walk out because nowadays you can just walk out after a scope
Right.
basically,
Right.
or I'm going to be wheeled out and my life's going to be different, right? Because I'm going to have to be crutching around and I'm going to
Yeah.
be in pain. So literally I said, yeah, okay, like if you can fix it, go ahead. Because ultimately that's probably the better thing to do for your
Yeah.
longevity, right? So I kept thinking in my mind, okay, when you wake up, you have to ask them, you have to ask them what option they
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
And literally, I remember I just waking up, I was all groggy, and it was the first question I asked. I said, "What did you guys do? Did you scope it or did you repair?" They said scope, and then I just went back, like fell back
Yeah.
asleep. But that was an interesting thing. It kind of weaves in as well as you have these intentions that you set before you go to sleep or before that, and then that can because I probably was still in this state of consciousness where I was unconscious and conscious, kind of groggy,
Yeah.
but I still had that thought in my mind like locked in there to where I still had enough whatever it was in my consciousness to ask that
To sort of
question.
bridge the gap.
Yeah, because I was the most concerned about it because I was like, this is gonna dictate how my life is gonna go for the next like 6 months or whatever.
When I had my surgery for cancer, um, when I came out of it and I thought back to what the experience was, I was in one way just terrified by the
Mm,
black blank
right.
that was in between me doing the counting that you do to, whereas when you get scoped, like, when you go in for a colonoscopy, they put you out, but they don't put you all the way out. So it's like, or like when I had eye surgery, somebody asked me, I had my cataracts, right? Done. Look, my lens. And I'm like, well, first time when they did my first eye, my left eye, I had to ask them if they gave me anything beforehand. They were like,
Mm,
yeah.
mm,
They were like, why? I was like, because I was completely awake for the whole thing. And somebody asked me, what was that like? Did it hurt? I was like, yeah, it hurt. You know, I said it was like a combination of watching the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey and that scene from Marathon Man when the cruel dentist is pulling the guys, like, because every once in a while I could see the face of the doctor that was like doing the laser,
yeah.
but the
Yeah.
lasers are coming into your eye and you're literally seeing them and you're hearing it and you're feeling it. Um, but yeah, that was strange because I'd never been out before, right? Before this major surgery that I had never been out before. But again, I don't know if it's connected or not. After my surgery was over, um, I had to have an ileostomy bag for a while, which my doctor said, look, I know you're going to say no because you're a guy, but if I don't give you the bag and you fail, then you might have one for the rest of your life. I was like, go ahead and do it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
go ahead and do
No
it.
questions. Yeah.
I'm good. Um, and so I've never had one before. So I think it's working. Home health care worker nurse comes by my house the week after my surgery to see if I know what I'm doing. And she's like, I don't need to come back. You're good. You know what I mean? Like, you're good. And I said, okay. And so, unbeknownst to me, it wasn't working.
Hmm.
And what I did notice in the month after my surgery was that I would eat something, and about 5 to 8 hours later, I would projectile vomit, like The Exorcist, like that gross. And it kept happening. And then finally, Thanksgiving rolled around, and my wife said, "You have got to go back to the surgeon and ask him what's wrong because you look terrible." My hair had gone completely white. You see, I have some of the darkness back. So apparently, it's true. Stress will whiten your hair.
Oh, definitely.
Um, and I had lost 35 pounds that I didn't even know I had.
Huh.
And so I went back to my doctor and he was like, "What the heck is going on? Let me x ray you." He did. He couldn't see a blockage. He said, you know, "Do you feel well enough to go home?" And I said, "What would you do, Tim?" And he said, I'd like to check in the hospital. I want to find out what's going on." I was like, "Let's do that," because the hospital is right next door. So he checked me in there. They put me on, uh, they gave me fluids, right? An IV. And I immediately felt 10 times better because by the end there, I was subsisting on popsicles and I was still throwing up. And I kept asking myself, where's all this coming from? What is it? Because I'm not, you know. And so when I had my surgery at first at St. Vincent's up in Little Rock, they said, we know you're in pain, especially with a bunch of cuts down here. But if you can get up and walk, it's going to speed your recovery. So get up and walk. So that's what I was doing. I got checked into the hospital. Even though I was super uncomfortable, I was getting up and walking. Well, I don't know how he found out, but my parish priest just showed up to my hospital room. And I know my wife didn't call him,
Hmm.
right? So somehow, maybe it was one of my brothers in the Knights of Columbus told Father Mark that I was in the hospital, but he brought me communion. So he gave me the sacrament of the sick, which used to be called extreme unction. It's, the what you would get if you were in a car crash and you want to say your final confession, and
Yep. Yep.
the anointing of the sick or the dying.
I've witnessed that.
Right. And so he gave me that. He prayed over me. He gave me communion. Then later, about an hour later, after he left, I was walking, and because what I do is I just unhook the IV and tie a knot in it, and just leave the room, and then I'd come back, just hook it back in. So I was walking about an hour later, and all of a sudden my bag filled up, like, completely. I'd never done this before. And so I had a kit, went back to the room, got myself, swapped out, filled up again, filled up like 3 times in a row. And all of that pressure that I'd been feeling down in my gut after the surgery completely went away. And so the next day, Tim comes in, and I'm like, "Did y'all give me something?" And he
Hmm.
said, "No, just water." He said, "Why?" I said, "Because all of the problems I was having went away. Like, my bag filled up 3 times, I had to swap it out 3 times in a row, gone." He said, "Well, good." He said, "I talked to Lance, that's my surgeon up in Little Rock, and he wants to see you as soon as you get out. If you can keep your lunch down, I'm gonna let you go." And so I did. I kept my lunch down, and all of a sudden I could taste food again. Hadn't been able to taste food since I had the surgery. And I got checked out of the hospital, called Lance's office. He said, "Can you get up to Little Rock right now?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "But I'm not going to make it by the time your office closes." He said, "I'll wait for you." So I drove the hour and a half to Little Rock, made it just about at 5 o'clock, I think. Um, got into his office. He comes walking in, and he's like, "Man," he said, "I'm really sorry all this happened to you." He said, "But this means I get to reverse you earlier than I thought I was going to. What are you doing the day after Christmas?" And my wife made me do it for like the week after that, because she's like, "The day after Christmas, you're going to ruin Christmas. You won't be able to." I'm like, "That's true." So I said, "Tim told me that you had a theory about me." He said, "Yeah, man." He said, "When I cut into you," and I had robotic surgery, so he was in Skynet. I didn't even see him. Um, he said, "Yeah, when I cut into you, your abdominal muscle is 4 times thicker than a man your age. What the hell have you been doing?" And I said, "Well, apparently I've been walking around with a 35-pound gut that I was in denial about. I've been holding it in for the last 20 years." And he just laughed. He said, "Well, look," he said he handed me my pathology report, and he walked out of the room, and the nurse came in. I'm reading it. And I said, "I'm a smart guy, but I don't know pathology report from, you know."
Hmm.
And I said, "But all I'm seeing is a bunch of zeros here." She said, "You're cured."
Hmm.
I said, "I'm cured." She said, "You're cured." I said, "I can actually use that word." She said, "Yep."
Wow.
And I was told later by my doctors that the outcome I had, only 20% of people with my diagnosis get it.
Wow.
And so I was driving home, and as you can imagine, I can't even, my butt's not even touching the seat of my driver's seat. I'm like floating. And long about the time I get to about 45 minutes from my house, my ileostomy bag not only fills up, but it fails. Like, so now I got shit going down my pants. I got to pull into the Walmart parking lot, find a secure place where I can strip out of my clothes, get myself cleaned up, walk into Walmart, get myself cleaned up in there, buy 2 t-shirts, come back out. And I remember looking up thinking, man, how would my dad, and I felt like it was God saying, "Hey, where goeth your pride now? Just calm down." Do you know what I mean? But when I saw Father Mark again, I said this. I told my mother she wasn't allowed to believe that this was a miracle. But literally the only thing that was different about, I got water at the hospital and I got communion,
Hmm.
right? And Father Mark just looked at me and he said, "Yeah, but what's a miracle?" I was like, "Good point." You know. So I don't know. I'm gonna end by saying, these types of things are the things that convince me these are real. You know what I mean? And I think we dupe ourselves into believing that they're not real. I don't know, maybe to ward off a certain kind of fear. I've always said this about people that don't believe in God. Believe you me, they have their moments where they wake up in the middle of the night, like C.S. Lewis said, and said, "Wait a minute, what if I'm wrong?" Like that's the thing that haunts them. My tagline for my novel is, "What if old fairy tales, after all, are true?" I think they are. So anyway,
Yeah, yeah, and thank you so much. I think this has been a fantastic
well, I hope so.
discussion. Yeah, I
Um,
mean, if not for anyone else, I think for me.
and for me,
Yeah, for me. I
um,
know my mom really. I bought her a dream book. Uh, what was it after her parents passed away?
right,
Oh my. Okay, can I tell you one more dream? This will
sure,
solidify the whole thing. Oh my gosh,
sure,
I can't even. Gosh, I can't even remember. Can't even. I can't even think why I didn't think about this as we've been talking. Okay, this will wrap it all up very nicely. This is crazy. Okay, so my grandparents and my mom's parents, they were married for I think almost 69 years.
hmm,
My mom,
amazing,
yeah, they lived in this house. Ended up selling it right after they both passed. It was really sad, but
right,
this house almost had its own. Uh, this house almost had its own personality to it, right? Like all these memories and things like that.
right,
And of course, the wind starts kicking up right as I'm about to tell this story. It's awesome. Okay, so basically, uh, my grandpa, he passed away in May of, what was it, 2023, I believe. Or I might be getting trying to remember like the years, but basically he passed away in May, and then my grandma passed away in February. So it wasn't too long after, right?
right,
And I talk about my grandma a lot actually in my podcast a ton, because the day she went into the hospital was Valentine's Day, and that was, I think that, yeah, that was Valentine's Day 2023. And yeah, okay, so this is matching up. So basically, at the time when my grandpa passed away, I was alone, but I was still married at the time, but we were
mhm,
struggling. And I don't remember this dream as much, but I do remember a dream before the day he died, just knowing that grandpa was going to die the next day. I don't really remember that one as much, but my grandma's one I will never forget.
yeah,
So he passed away, like you were saying, uh, the priest was there in the room with us. Really powerful. We all had hands on my grandpa, witnessed his last breath. Uh, just what a what a crazy thing, because they have such a big family, and a lot of the
right,
family all worked at the same printing press my grandpa used to own, and
hmm,
now a lot of them still do printing for like the Denver Zoo and all the sports teams.
right,
So they're all really tight knit family, and we're like all packed in the room with grandpa, like everybody in there. There's like
yeah,
over 20 people in there, right? We're all laying hands on him, and it was just amazing. So then he passed away, and then my grandma's health, I think, just started to deteriorate, I think, after that, right? And I remember I was with my mom, because my mom has a nursing background and has just been was a saint throughout the whole thing. She's still a saint. We actually call my grandma Saint Anne.
right,
I remember my aunt talking about, like, right after she passed, we were just talking about stories, and she's like, the meanest thing that grandma ever did was tell me to go play outside. Like, literally. And then I look through my memories. I'm like, I can't even remember a moment where my
right,
grandma, like, where I was like, wow, like, that was mean or whatever. Like, my
yeah,
grandma was just, my grandparents, they were great. There was always food at the table. My grandpa always would get mad at me if I didn't eat like 7 bowls of chili. He'd
right,
always say, like, you don't like how I cook.
yeah,
And then he had like 3 kegs, one outside in the shed, one in the basement, and then one in like this movable bar that he had. So he was a character. He was in the Navy. They both
right,
just told great stories.
yeah,
So there's a lot of memories in that house for sure. And one thing that was happening was, um, when we were taking care of my grandma, we would take turns because both of them ended up passing away in that house
Okay.
because my mom works at home health care at the hospice. So
Gotcha.
her company was able to do that, which was just such a blessing, I think,
Yeah.
for our family. And I have like a ton of nurses in my family too. So there was one night where I was with all the nurses, all my cousins and stuff, and we are taking care of grandma, and it's just a really great moment. But basically, the night before she passed away, I had a very vivid dream. So I went down into the basement, and in the basement, it's like this. It's kind of that marble tile. I don't know if it's marble, but it's like that, like kind of shiny tile, and it's uh, uh, poker hands, or yeah, different poker hands for each square,
Oh, okay. Okay.
and it's really cool. And the wallpaper is like this Victorian like picture of these people like in carriages, like in France or something like that.
Yeah.
And then in the middle of the room, there's this pool table. So it's just a cool place. My grandpa had this saloon doors that went into the bar, called it Jack's Bar, Jack's Pub. And I remember walking down, and I turned the corner, and my mom's oldest brother passed away when he was in, I think he was in high school going into college.
Right.
And that's just always been a thing in our family. I think just a sad kind of thing,
Right.
whenever he comes up. And I remember turning the corner, and he was playing pool, right? And he was looking at me, and I was like, that's Uncle John.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he was wearing my grandpa's leather jacket. And I was like, that's grandpa too.
Yeah.
And I was looking in their eyes, and they were talking to me. Like they weren't, the mouth wasn't open, but just, it was kind of eerie, but at the same time I felt like, this is my family, basically.
Yeah.
And I was like, why are you here? And they're like, we're waiting for her. And this is the craziest part. The place where they were standing was directly underneath where she
Right.
died.
Right.
Like if you retrace the steps and stood where they were, you look up at the ceiling, it was right where her bed was.
Yeah.
And then the next day she passed away.
There you go.
Like
Yeah.
that's one of the things that solidifies my belief in an afterlife, in God. We remember we were asking her, I think right before she passed away, people were just trying to ask her questions.
Right.
And they're like, do you see so and so? And she might say no. Do you see so and so? Yes. Do you see grandpa? Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And they're like, do you see Jesus? And she's literally said, she's like, I have a meeting with him. I just don't know what time yet.
Exactly. Exactly.
I'm just like, wow, like
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Well, my father passed away at home, with my mom holding his hands and my brothers and sisters around singing James Taylor to him. I didn't make it. We were on our way. And I remember I got the call. We were stuck in traffic in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and my wife started, crying and saying she was sorry because she felt like it was her fault that we didn't make it
Mm,
on time. And I looked at her and I said, "Honey, I said everything that my dad and I ever needed to say to each other, we said in life."
right.
I was like, "I am not upset at all. I didn't need to be there for that. I didn't need to." But my mom, on the other hand, she lived another 10 years after my dad passed away, and then she died suddenly.
Hmm.
And my dad's passing was really hard on all of us. We thought we were ready for it because it was from cancer, and it took some time, and he was showing early signs of dementia, although he was 78 years old. You know what I mean? Like he had a good full life. Um, and so we thought we were ready, and we weren't. And then my mom passed away just suddenly, like just nobody expected it at all. And we were good. And when we went to her funeral, the priests, gathered us together. There are 9 kids in my family, so gathered all of the siblings together and said, "Look, she passed away 2 days after Christmas,
Mm,
and she was a daily mass attender." And he said, "I just want you to know that your mom came to midnight mass for Christmas, and then she came to the afternoon. She came to mass the day after Christmas. She went to confession before she went to mass the day after Christmas, and then the next morning she died."
mm.
And I was like, "Well, okay, mom, that's the way to do it. You want to go to heaven, you don't want to stand in no lines." Like, You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Just
the VIP pass.
yeah, just get the VIP pass. Go to confession, go to mass, go to sleep, and then pass away. You know.
Yeah.
So and that again, that gives me hope too. I'm like that, whereas my dad's was much more of a struggle for him. My mom's was sudden, completely unexpected.
Mm.
But as far as the way that we were able to, spiritually and psychologically handle it, it was we were great. We were great. So I don't know. Maybe I don't know if that's a good way to end things today, but I guess this is the point. Let's bring all the way back down around to the Exorcist. It seems to me that this should move us toward a greater faith, not more question. Leastways, that's the way I think of my lucid dreaming, the way that it's dovetailed or been woven with the whole
Yeah.
rosary ring story and even the story of my cure. I think they're of a piece. Not sure exactly how they all go together, but they do. So
Yeah, yeah, and to land the plane, I think just with the podcast and the focus, right? Speaking about porn and all that, I think what I've realized in my life is when I was really addicted to it, really consumed by it, I was missing these moments in my life, these signals, and how they interplayed with each other, the meaning of dreams, the meaning of things that happen in life, how they interplay with my consciousness, right? And I think the more I pursue Christ, the more I'm aware of the temptations that lurk, the more I'm present, right? Present, clear in the moment. The
yeah,
more I see these things that happen, the more meaning is attached to them, which I think in turn brings more meaning to my life, to where I feel like I'm living this life of meaning where things matter.
yeah,
And when I'm talking with you right now, like this matters to me, right? This is important. This is something I'll always remember. This has meaning to it, right? But I think when we get consumed by something, and when we're consumed by something, maybe where it starts seeping into our subconscious, our dreams, we start to we start to get that barrier between us and a greater power that's going to lead us to do uh, meaningful things in our lives, things of purpose, not just for ourselves but other people.
yeah,
But when we're so consumed, it starts to block that off, right?
yeah,
And it's, I think if there's something I can get across, at least that I've experienced, is that when I have dreams, it starts to pull me back into my reality. Because yeah, I still have times. I just recently, I feel like I had a sexual dream, but I can't really remember it. And it was
right,
something I checked in with my group on Thursday. So I said, "Hey, I don't quite know what I did in this dream, but I don't know if that's a good thing because I
yeah,
should be aware of what's happening. If
yeah,
I'm having a sexual dream, that to me should be a sign of something of, hey, is there something in real life where I'm letting slide or I could be more armored up on?
yeah,
Because those dreams are going to start to build up, and I'm kind of waiting for that dream to happen again so that
right,
I can step in and say no.
right.
Right, like, that's mentally I'm preparing myself for that, saying,
But
"How can I be
also,
ready?" Yeah.
also the other thing that you've already demonstrated is before you went into your last surgery, before you went under, you said the first thing I need to do is ask them this question. Everybody can do that before they go to sleep to make sure that they're directing what kinds of dreams they do and don't have.
And that's probably why they teach you in Catholic school to pray before you go to bed.
Yeah. But also, you can't, I mean, before you go to sleep, remind yourself, I am not going to go through that door. I'm not going to be dreaming about this. I'm not doing that. And I think that that can work. Have you seen the film The Big Fish? And I'll land my plane here.
Oh, yeah, I love that
Big
film.
Fish. Okay, so what it does at the end, you've got this kid that the thing that he's been possessed by is this deep-seated resentment for the fact that he's got a dad that sucks the air out of the room everywhere he goes, right? And his dad is coming to the end of his life, and he looks at his son and says, "You've got to finish the story. You've got to finish the story." And he says, "Okay, okay, I'll finish the story. How does it begin?" And he says, "Just like this." And the next shot you got is them escaping from the hospital. And while you were talking, I was thinking, it's an admixture of this is what a fiction is. A fiction is the rounding and the framing that we do to the life that happens,
Mm,
that turns the life that happens into something that you do.
mm,
And that's what actually gives it meaning, if that makes sense.
mm.
And I
Yeah.
think that's what you're talking about too.
Yeah.
Going back to that whole thing that we talked about before regarding agency, it's you have to become the teller of your own story, but in order to be the teller of your own story, you have to understand the elements that happen and why they're happening to you.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
if
That's
that makes
profound. Yeah, that's profound. Yeah, because I think that's something when someone's struggling like I did in the past, you're not thinking about that. You're just
right.
trying to escape it. You're trying to avoid it. But
Yeah.
once you meet it, and yeah, once you understand more of your story, right?
Right.
Like whatever that trauma is or whatever that thing is in your life that
Right.
you're using porn or alcohol or whatever to numb or to escape from, that's
Right.
like where the answer lies almost, because every hero's journey, right? Like that's a big part of it, is like the dragon, right? the
Yeah.
the beast that you have to slay. A lot of times I think it's in our past, and it creeps up and it affects things
Yeah.
that, like, subtly and then more directly. But yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think it's important, right? Anything the listener does, I think, just before you go to bed, that also just made me think, and maybe for our next podcast, because I know you were bringing up AI and stuff,
Yeah.
that might be a good segue in the next discussion that we have, because I do think that having our phones on late at night, looking at porn right before we sleep, I think that can have an effect on our conscious, right?
Oh, for sure.
Of like, what are you doing before you go to bed?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's for me something I'm doing more of, is like putting my phone in another room. Oftentimes, like to listen to things before I go to sleep, but that's something I'm being more mindful of now. I think is before I go to sleep, like, what am I thinking about? What am I listening to? What am I looking at?
Yeah.
Because all those things I think can play into, like we were talking about, your dreams, your conscious, and then also like your reality as well.
Yeah. For sure. For sure.
But hey, it was great having you on
Thanks.
the
Like, nice to
podcast
see
again.
everybody again. Hope to see you again. And I'll
Yeah,
let you know next time I do. I think I told you I'm doing another lecture, so when I get one up, I'll shoot you a note. Otherwise, we'll be in touch.
yeah, we'll be in touch. Well, everybody, keep fighting the good fight uh, in your reality and in your subconscious and your dreams. Fight the good fight all around, and break free, stay free, be free. Much love to everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Talk to you later.
God bless.